How to get healthy. This is something that I think most new people who are getting into health really don't have a good direction to start from. I know with myself, starting out for about several years ago, I had to go through a bunch of different pitfalls and traps just to actually learn about what getting healthy actually is. So today I'm joined by Michael, and we are going to be discussing how to get healthy. So let me introduce Michael here.
I'm a nutritional therapist by profession. I got into health around 5 years ago when I found this book. I think it was called The Optimum Nutrition Bible by Patrick Holford, one of the UK's nutritionists. And the more I was reading this, I just realized this is such an incredible Bible of information. I found connection and information I never knew about. I had no idea that you can tweak your health and your lifestyle by making all these changes that nobody was talking about, or very few people were talking about back then. And I realized this is something I wanted to share and something I was passionate about. And I wanted to turn this into more than just a hobby. I was always passionate about fitness, but I saw this as a huge opportunity to maybe transition career-wise into something more interesting and something more I felt more empowered. And so I got to a college, naturopathy college in London. I studied for 3 years in there, and that's where I got my certification. Later on, I also got a health coaching certification, and I do a little bit of blogging and research on site. And that's about it. At the moment, I'm running a health practice, a nutrition practice where I focus on men's health. And I'm working with clients, just helping them with their health problems, mental health, digestion, energy, metabolism. So yeah, that's about me.
And just for the viewers here too, I've actually worked with Michael with his naturopathic support. I will also have links to his website and Facebook and all of that attached to this video. So with myself here, I was getting into personal development, and that's really what led me to getting into health stuff. And I've kind of become a bit of a health nut over the years. I've gone kind of extreme. I mean, when most people talk to me, they usually just kind of like, they don't really want to hear what I'm saying almost. They kind of give you like, oh, that's just kind of like BS type thing of the stuff you're talking about, like all these little, toxins and things like that. It didn't start out that way. I was pretty overweight. So I lost about 60 pounds. I got into like endurance running. I was running up to like a half marathon and stuff like that. And initially I got into like eating the vegan diet, and that was kind of a big introduction for me. And I was listening to all this vegan kind of stuff. And that's really what led me into losing all the weight. And then it kind of grew more into learning about toxins, and then actually just learning more about individual foods and how to heal through just those specific one things instead of just encompassing this one diet or one idea of a way to get healthy. So I guess that should lead us kind of into what our first topic here should be, which would be, what does being healthy mean? So I'm curious, what does that mean to you?
Mhm. So I think we can start by, if you type in Google, probably what does it mean to be healthy, or if you look up into one of the big major organizations such as WHO or one of those that are kind of setting up guidelines for the biggest public, you would find something in terms of health is the prevention of disease, right? Health is living in a state where you're free from disease, from mental health disease, from inflammation, from problems with your physiology. But now we could probably argue that health could mean a little bit more than that most people won't necessarily be just satisfied with being free from disease, because in my opinion, there is a big gray area between having a disease on one end and being healthy on the other. And most of us are somewhere in the middle. Most people have something that they're struggling with, a symptom here and there, condition here and there, some allergy, some inflammation, some mood problems, some energy problems. And so this term of what is the ultimate health, I think is very much individual. But and you could dissect it into multiple kind of like sub levels, such as a health should be having an abundance of natural energy. I think that's what I would start with. This is more a lot of guys and a lot of young girls in our age kind of struggle with just really not having enough energy to do everything you want to do. And so one of those aspects is having enough natural energy from the morning till the evening to do everything you want to do, without any issues, without needing to use stimulants, use coffee or stimulating capsules or recreational drugs, really anything you would prefer to use to give you a kick. So you should have enough energy to do all those things. Secondly, a big part of health is digestion. Digestion is probably one of the most important aspects of holistic health. And you should probably have a digestion that's free of constipation, free of diarrhea, pains, inflammation in your gut, and just really digestive issues. You should be able to tolerate all sorts of food, whether it has fiber, whether it has gluten, whether it has dairy, and all those common allergens. Immune system is another sub aspect of health. You should really be catching every cold or flu that's coming around. And so of course, it's okay to occasionally get sick a little bit. Everybody gets sick, everybody gets cold, everybody gets flu. It's just having immune system strong enough that's able to catch most of that. That would be another aspect of the health. So did you want to say something? I felt like...
Well, I think it's like a reference point. Like without going back to your first initial thing you were talking about, without really a reference point of feeling healthy, it's kind of hard to know what that actually is, because if you meet a lot of people, they just go, oh yeah, I'm healthy. And maybe they're, smoking every day and they're drinking energy drinks and stuff like that. And they're going, oh yeah, I'm healthy. This is great. And really, if you don't have that reference point, you don't know what healthy really is. I guess that was the biggest obstacle for me, was not having a clear idea of what was actually going to make me feel healthy in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've been feeling a certain way, you would have maybe define it as suboptimal, but you wouldn't even know you could feel better, right? Because you've always felt this way. I'm not talking about you directly, but let's say somebody has always been having low energy. They've always had to use 4 coffees a day, and they've always been reliant on stimulants and sugar to make it through the day. To them, this seems like a completely normal thing. It seems like this is the way it should be. And it's exactly like you say, you have no reference point. You don't know how you could feel if you maybe looked into that, if somebody helped you, if you read a bunch of health books and swapped around a few things in your diet, tried to replace that coffee with something else. And absolutely. It comes with really the understanding that what's happening at the moment may or may not be optimal. And it's about being open-minded enough to be willing to experiment and to look into what else could I do. Maybe I could feel a little bit better. I could feel a one step healthier if I did X, Y, Z. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So if we were talking about like a reference point of where we could start. So like, let's say we had someone who, let's just say their name's Phil. And Phil, he eats the standard American diet. Maybe he goes out, he eats fast food, maybe a couple times a week. He's eating a lot of processed foods. He's not really cooking a whole lot of his own stuff. Maybe he's like throwing some TV dinners in there. He's a bit overweight, but he's not too bad. He doesn't smoke, but he does drink maybe a couple times a week. He's not real big on the exercise. Spends a lot of time watching TV, that kind of stuff. I feel like that kind of encompasses a fair amount of Americans. And this guy, every morning he gets up, he's got to have caffeine. He can't make it through the day. If he misses the caffeine at the job, I mean, he's just slugging along the entire day. So if Phil was in this position, where is he going to start?
So I think it starts with a self-realization that Phil would have to realize that he needs to do something about health. And a lot of people never get to this point. They until a crisis hits, of course, until something happens, an acute emergency, really. It's often what it takes. And you could probably think about examples of people like this. I can definitely think about examples of people like this who they have received all the warnings, but they've never really taken the responsibility. And it's only a medical emergency, unfortunately, often something like stroke or heart attack, that actually wakes people up to the reality that the way they've been treating their bodies and their health maybe wasn't optimal. So unfortunately, in many cases, it's the extreme trigger, such as lying down and looking at a group of doctors who are about to operate your heart, that this is when the person actually decides, I need to do something about my health. But if Phil, let's say, at some point he stumbles upon an article in news that says eating bacon 5 days a week is probably going to shorten your health span by 20 years, right? And Phil suddenly he realizes this is what I do and I need to change something. So yeah, did you want to say something?
No, you can continue.
Okay. So the first thing he should do if he's concerned, I think it's what I advise to people is go speak to your doctor and just see what's the status quo, see where you are at the moment, whether you feel good or whether you're somebody who's been feeling a lot of symptoms or who already has some condition going on. Start with your doctor. Go see them. They are trained in diagnosis. They're trained in testing. They're trained in understanding when they look at you and they listen to you what's probably going on. They're really the experts of diagnosis. So go speak to your doctor and tell them how you feel, tell them what you're concerned about. Maybe if Phil mentioned that he's been treating his body the way he's been treating for the 30 years, the doctor's going to straight away go for, let's check your blood sugar, let's check your cholesterol, let's take your blood pressure, let's take your inflammatory markers, all these things that can already tell you what's going on in Phil's body. So always start with your doctor, get a bunch of tests, get the most of them. And then the next step is really on to you. If you get a diagnosis, then you can decide to take medicine, but you don't have to. This is really a personal choice what happens next. But always I would start with understand what's the present point. Start with the status quo, go see your doctor, get a bunch of tests, get a diagnosis if you need to, and then work from there. The second biggest area is probably what we put in our mouth, the food we eat. And we could spend hours and hours talking about this. Encyclopedia and books have been written on the topic of diet, but really what we put out in our mouth, what we drink and what we eat defines the outcome of our health. And our body can only use what we feed it. Our body is constantly repairing itself. The immune system is constantly on the go. The tissues are being damaged, the muscles are being damaged, the bones are repairing themselves. The brain is also always reshaping and repairing itself. And the body is using a lot of energy and a lot of nutrients and building materials. So it's very much dependent on us supplying these materials. And if the quality of materials we're supplying is rubbish, if we're eating a standard American diet, if we're eating a lot of processed food, a lot of junk, drinking a lot of alcohol, then these essential nutrients may be missing. And then over a certain period of time, a disease may occur, such as cardiovascular disease, such as asthma, such as rheumatoid arthritis, because the body hasn't been treated the way it should have been treated. It hasn't been fed the type of food it should have been fed. Another aspect is physical activity. According to the research, the ideal amount of exercise is somewhere around, I think, 155 minutes per week. So if you exercise 5 days a week, that's half an hour a day. Yeah, so that's very much doable. Half an hour a day is literally 4 kilometers of walk. It's going for a jog around your neighborhood. It's taking a bike and going for a spin, doing 15 kilometers. Really doing whatever physical activity means to you. And it's different meaning for different people. Some people will go for a bike. Some people like to dance. Some people like to go hiking, rock climbing, really whatever gets you moving, whatever gets Phil moving, and whatever increases his heart rate to a point that it becomes a little bit uncomfortable, but not, it doesn't necessarily have to. Even walking counts as a physical activity. And then another aspect is gradually removing the habits and the choices that are not necessarily serving us. The most obvious would be smoking and drinking alcohol. Everybody knows that this is bad. Everybody in nutrition agrees that smoking and alcohol drinking is bad for us. Another factor would be removing sources of trans-saturated fats, also sometimes called trans fats. Trans fats are basically chemically altered hydrogenated fats to prolong their shelf life. The problem is they've been linked to cardiovascular disease. And again, this is one of the very few things that pretty much everybody in nutrition agrees on, that trans fats are bad for us. Then other aspects are not eating as much junk food. So doing more cooking, buying more whole foods, more vegetables, more fruits, more legumes, more nuts, and less processed foods, less foods that you stick in a microwave and heat in the original packaging, which we can talk about later on about plastics and toxins. But it's really coming back to as nature intended, coming back to the whole foods, and whether people also decide to include things like lean meats, eggs, dairy is a personal choice. Some people have ethical preferences not to eat certain foods. Some people don't mind. So this is very much individual, but we should always be coming towards diet being mostly whole, being mostly natural, not chemically altered, not stripped of nutrients, not being formed in a way that it could be eaten 3 or 4 months. A majority of whole foods will go bad within 2 weeks, with the exception of legumes and whole grains and things like that. So that would be another aspect of it. And then I think factor number 5 is stress and stress elimination, stress reduction. Stress is a huge component of the life we live today in the industrial countries. 100 years ago, it would have been infectious diseases that were killing most people, tuberculosis, hepatitis, and bacterial diseases. But we've pretty much become quite good at eradicating those. Nowadays, stress, excuse me, stress has become a huge factor, and I think this is definitely another topic worth looking into. Whether it's aspects like deep breathing, meditation, but stress is definitely a big aspect of health, and definitely something for Phil to look into. And maybe you have other points that are also worth looking into.
Yeah, one thing I really had missed when I first started getting into it was like a good source of clean water. And that was something that I really had not known quite enough about, especially for a good duration of my life, or using cheap water filters and things like that. Of course, now I've got the reverse osmosis water system and all that. But US water in general is pretty bad. I mean, like the tap water we have here is like, filled with arsenic and like metals and all sorts of stuff. And kind of going into what you were talking about with the food choices, it's pretty difficult too. Like one thing I noticed when I was first starting to change my habits was I had a girlfriend at the time, and there was always a lot of back and forth. It was an issue that I was changing this food because she's like, well, we've been dating for over a year now, and now you're not eating the stuff that I'm eating. And it would even cause fights between us just over a food choice, because there was now a division. And of course, I was the person who was making the food now at this point. So she kind of started getting along with it. And of course, I would still, make her whatever she wanted. So at the time I was just eating vegan food or whatever, but if she wanted me to have chicken for her or something, that's fine. We'll add that in your dish. I'm not going to force that upon you to eat the exact thing I'm eating. That's totally fine. I just noticed it even with people around me in general. Like even if I wasn't eating meat, they would be, oh, it's almost like kind of a less manly thing almost. It's like a cultural thing that's kind of ingrained in most of our society. And it's not really just like meat or eating vegan. It's even just like eating healthy food in general. There's like almost a stigma for it. Like I'll have relatives come over like, oh man, like how could you eat that? You know what I mean? It's just all fresh plant food or something.
Where's the protein, right?
Sure. Yeah. And I always hear that too. It's always a big thing of like, where's the protein? And I get adequate protein. I mean, I get close to like 100 grams a day, and I still don't currently eat meat at the moment. However, I should even mention too in here that I would be open enough to even try eating meat, even as someone who hasn't ate it for 4 years. And I think as someone like this Phil character we're talking about, I think that's having that mindset of, oh, I can try these different things to try to get my own results. And that's really what's going to lead him to being healthy, because some people they simply can't not eat meat, or meat could even be a problem, or the plant could be a problem. And in my case, I've had allergies to certain things like garlic or kale and things like that actually cause me to be sick. And it's so individual discovering this stuff that if someone just runs in there and goes, okay, I'm only eating these foods because this is what I saw on YouTube, you only eat this exact diet, and that could actually be destroying their health, that they're eating that stuff. If they're allergic to those items, or they can't process these items correctly, it could actually end up getting them worse results. And I noticed, especially when I was changing my diet, that I still didn't really feel that great. Like, I mean, I was jogging. I mean, I felt a lot better than I had. And then I started to notice how good, like how bad I actually felt. Like, it was kind of like a weird thing, because I didn't have any reference point of feeling better. And as I had a rough transition for a while, like a good year or two, where it was kind of like things were pretty tough. And I think part of it was like SIBO and other things that were probably still around that I just didn't know. And of course, I didn't know I had those food allergies to any of those types of foods. So I was sitting in there, and it was even like spinach now, I think even recently I've tested, and I have fatigue from that. Well, of course, every day, I'm grabbing a big handful of that. I'm putting it in the blender every single day, and I'm eating that. And I wasn't eating that before. I mean, yeah, I was eating, I wasn't eating great food. I sure didn't have a lot of energy, but if I was eating something I was allergic to, it was confusing. And then of course, when you go and talk to someone that they're like, oh, it's because you're not eating meat, or it's because you're not doing, you're not eating like how we eat. So that's really what's making you sick. It's not some other thing, maybe an allergy or something like that. It's because you're not eating the way that we eat. You were fine before you started doing all this crazy stuff. And it gaslights you pretty much, because then you're thinking, oh man, because I thought that too for a while. I was like, man, maybe I got to start eating some meat now. Like maybe that's the problem of why I don't feel good again, or something like that. So it gets really confusing.
Yeah, and we're all in our small bubbles and our shelves in what we believe in and what we are prepared to accept in our reality. And for somebody, stopping to eat meat could be a huge steps. And like you said, you had a girlfriend who wasn't not very open to changing her diet, and to somebody like that, it's a huge bursting of a bubble. It's a huge invasion in their world, and it's what's comfortable to her. And it's like a threat. It's like you are telling this person this is bad, and the way you eat is bad, and people can get very defensive about that. And I think that's one of the difficulties of whoever is trying to change a diet, is just the pushback of the family and of the friends and relatives and partners that have been used to eat in a certain way, but suddenly there is a change coming up, and they're scared. Like, what does this mean to me? Why is this person changing? And then come back, I cannot relate to you anymore. And this is always part of any change, not just dietary, not just health change, but really anything. There will always be factors that are trying to swing you back. Like, like it's a pendulum, swing from one side to another. You swing the pendulum to one extreme, and everybody else will try to swing it back, because they feel like you're also taking them for the ride, where it often has nothing to do with them. But because we're this tribal culture, when everybody has to conform to certain rules, and the rules of the games are set because we have always been doing things this way. I love this one, always been doing things this way. It means it cannot be wrong. And when you try to do something in a new way, it's threatening. It's threatening to the ego of the group, or what have you. So yeah, that's definitely a huge aspect, and it's always to be expected for anyone really listening to this. if they're struggling with health problems, it's always to be expected that when you're trying to change your diet, your lifestyle, your life, people will try to pull you back. And it's a factor that we should learn to work around, but definitely not let us limit it, not let it limit us in what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, it's like you have this like health matrix. And
Yeah.
I remember when I think I was in about sixth grade, and I had this friend, and he was, I mean, he was really overweight at the time. He must have been like 100 pounds overweight or something like that. I mean, he was a big guy. And we were eating at the cafeteria one day, and always what he would do, he would get the school lunch, and I mean, he would fill his entire tray with like ranch. I mean, it was like full. I mean, he would take a bunch of ranch. And I remember talking to him about it. And, you know, and I thought that was healthy. I thought it was healthy because it was like associated with a salad, is why I thought, oh, yeah, that's healthy. And I remember him telling me, he's like, no, man, this is like terrible for me. Like he was even like, he knew that it was terrible. Like he was overweight. He was eating. He knew that this was bad for him. This was a bad thing that he was doing. And really, it took a long time for me in my life to really hit a point where I was like, oh, wow, this is all this stuff that everyone taught me is not actually healthy. Because I remember when I first was deciding I wanted to make a change, I hadn't even found like personal development or anything yet. And I was working at Burger King, and I wanted to lose some weight at the time. And I was kind of wondering how I might be able to do it. And I was still eating some Burger King and still doing stuff like that. And of course, I was in there buying the salad at Burger King, right? And it was this like iceberg lettuce, you know, it has like no nutrition or anything in it. And, you know, just ranch, whatever. And, you know, maybe I'd get the cherry icy or something like that with it. And I was trying, even people then were like, oh, wow, I could never do that. Like, that's healthy. Like, people would even be telling, like, people I would work with, they'd be like, oh, wow, I can't believe you're eating healthy like that. And you're eating this thing. Because, you know, everyone, of course, if you're working at a place like Burger King, they all eat Burger King. Like, they don't, everyone eats Burger King when they work at Burger King. They're eating tons of it. Almost everyone who works there is usually a little overweight, unless they have a really fast metabolism, at least has been my experience working there. And it really makes it difficult to understand healthy choices. And it was like this slow progress where I, you know, slowly started to evolve. Like after that, it was, I don't know if you have them in your country, but it's called Winco. It's a grocery store. And they had these salads there that were probably a little better. It still had iceberg lettuce, but then it had, you know, other little veggies, like little, you know, more pieces of carrot. And then it had like, you know, a grilled piece of chicken. I think it was probably fried. It was, so it probably still wasn't that healthy. It was fried. And then you had your ranch. It was still an upgrade. And then it slowly kind of evolved from there. And then when I finally got into personal development stuff, that was really like where the tipping point was, where I was just like, oh, wow, this is totally different than what I thought it was. And it started out, the book I started looking at was the 150 healthiest foods. I don't know the author's name on hand. And what I would kind of do is kind of pick through there and then kind of just look at those foods. And then I would get a reference on YouTube, but even then it was difficult. Like it was really difficult to just copy someone and go, oh yeah, I'm just going to eat that meal that guy set up, especially because people's tastes are so different. And just making my own meals, that alone, I mean, it took me a long time to develop that. And then, of course, my cooking skills weren't as good. And it wasn't like I could just run to the store and buy this kind of stuff that is a nice, healthy meal. There's nowhere you can really just go get this, especially here where I live. If I was maybe in like Portland, Oregon or something like that, I'd probably have a bit better options eating out, which I did travel up there and get some stuff. But even then it was still like, you know, they'll put cheap oils and all that kind of stuff in there. So kind of going into our next point here, I was kind of curious on what your thoughts are on how long will the results take. So let's say the same Phil character, he starts slowly implementing this stuff because he's not going to be able to instantly change everything overnight. I mean, some of this stuff, I mean, he's addicted to certain things. He's going to have a lot of struggles of really changing this. What could he expect for a time frame of getting results with some decent implementation. Like, let's say he's really serious about it. He's starting to exercise every day. Maybe it's only 20 minutes. It's just a light walk. He's not going out. He's not getting shredded. He's not doing anything crazy. And he's kind of in the same position of the story I was telling you with myself. Maybe he's kind of starting to pick better options and he's still kind of struggling. The information still maybe isn't quite there. What do you think would be a reasonable time frame for him to start losing some weight and actually maybe feeling better? Maybe he's 30 pounds overweight starting here.
So with at the initial stage, once he starts eliminating the most negative foods or the most harmful foods, such as the calorically dense ones, the sausages, the bacons, or the sugary stuff, the initial weight loss will actually start pretty quickly. And we've also seen this in research, and I've seen a little bit of this in my practice, that the very earliest changes start fairly quickly. He'll start feeling better fairly quickly. Once he starts exercising a little bit, eating a little bit healthier, drinking more water and less Coke, less coffee, less sugary water. And then after a while, it will seem like it has slowed down. The body will kind of adjust to a new homeostasis, and the weight will start dropping slower. His waist will kind of start stay at the same. It'll basically stop making progress at some point, and this is usually a point where he will need to go deeper. So maybe in this case, it will mean he needs to stop staying up till 2 a.m. Maybe it will mean he needs to start sleeping for 8 hours. Maybe it will mean he needs to stop adding sugar to his tea, to his coffee. Maybe it will mean he needs to stop eating his dinner so late. So usually this is a point at which it benefits to have somebody to support you, or really to educate yourself a little bit further into what else could you do. Because once you think like you're plateauing, it's possible that there's something that's preventing you from making further step. And he may not necessarily have the knowledge or the information to know what that is. It's not always the most obvious thing. But in terms of how long will it take for generally for people to get better, it really always depends what's your starting point. If you're mostly a regularly active person, if you're healthy young guy or young girl, you'll improve pretty quickly, because it's possible that there's only something very small, right? That's once it can be fixed, such as I've seen people's energy improve just by increasing their protein, just by that one thing, or just starting to eat breakfast, or starting to eat a little bit more carbohydrates, and the energy skyrockets. So if somebody is fairly healthy, the changes are really easy and the outcomes are fairly quick. Where if you're coming from somebody such as who has had rheumatoid arthritis for the last 10 years, and they've been on 10 years of methotrexate, and they've been taking all sorts of other medication, eating horrible food, not exercising because of the pain, being in a lot of stress, for that person, it may take 3 years to get better, at least 2 years to get better, because the amount of change the body has to go through is enormous. And there's also a certain mental bias. The person is biased to a certain kind of lifestyle. She is used to having her tea with the sugar 5 times a day, and that will be difficult to get rid of. Or she's used to not eating breakfast and then having a donut with a sugary drink at the local coffee store. So the longer something has been going on, the more difficult it will be, and the longer it will generally take to heal. I think most conditions are reversible with the right support and with the right guidance, most of them. But the duration really depends on how aggressive are you going after this, how much support do you have, often how much finances the person has, because this sort of support can be really expensive once you start getting into therapy and organic foods and supplements and herbs. So budget could be a limiting factor as well. The environment, such as like we told, if you have a family, it's always pulling you back, and you're trying to heal your gut and you have to be on a specific diet, but then your family is like, oh, don't worry about it, just eat this, come join us for dinner, I promise there is no dairy, there is no gluten, or they have no idea. And then you get, it's like this seesaw action, right? You're making 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or vice versa, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. So it's all these factors that are limiting the speed of how fast somebody can progress. As an example, we could talk about our support, where you were very committed and you got your results fairly quickly because you saw you already have a lot of information about health. You're very knowledgeable about health, and so working with you has been kind of sort of a blessing from my side. It was and which is why you got all the amazing results you got, really, because you were compliant, you were interested, you were excited, and you were already a health nut. And if you were somebody who's come after 15 years of suffering from a chronic health condition, the support would have been much more difficult because you would already be more rigid and less likely to want to change, and already adapted to living with a certain disease, maybe, which is where the healing takes much longer. So what I'm trying to say, it really depends on how long you've been experiencing this, and the duration of improvement and of healing will be different for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like what you said about the resources too, because if you have someone like a naturopath right on hand, or you had like this video that we're shooting right here, right on hand. So if I would have had what we're recording right now when I first started, I would have had way better results. I mean, it wouldn't have took me this many years probably to get these results, just because I could have had a clear laid out map and went, oh, wow, I can just, start here and then keep progressing. And then maybe I'll have all these resources along the way and know what to look for. I didn't even know what a naturopath was when I first looked into this. I didn't even know that was a thing. I'd never even heard of such a thing like that. To me, the only thing that existed was just Western medicine here. And I had a pretty bad experience with a lot of that stuff. The stuff that I took from them, it messed me up. And even early on in my life, I mean, I experienced bad symptoms from taking this stuff. And it's a bad approach that they have a lot of the time, that it's just like to suppress the symptoms. It's not really like actually coming in and curing them, because I remember I had acid reflux since I was a kid, and my acid reflux was just really bad. And, all the time this was an issue. And then it was like all of a sudden, I always got prescriptions and stuff, but I never filled them. That was what their solution. Oh, just take some of this. And I couldn't trust them. But of course, I was still drinking energy drinks and eating all this other garbage that I was totally unaware of. And then it was like I changed my diet, and out of nowhere, the acid reflux had just disappeared. Never came back. Just never came back. And it was just totally gone. And no one had ever mentioned that to me, that I had any other option of just, oh, maybe you just need to eat something different. That never occurred to me, and no one ever mentioned that to me. So I think that resources in general really is a total game changer for someone when they're first getting into something like this. And there's so much confusion out there. There's so many things that people can get, trapped in, which we'll probably hop into a little bit later. But I kind of wanted to talk maybe a little bit about the kind of habits that someone would need. And so I know when I first started making these changes, what really supercharged my results was I'd been doing garage sailing, and I realized that I could walk 6 miles, right? And I was pretty beat after doing this 6 miles. And I just made a commitment that I was going to get myself in condition to where I could do that every day, basically. And at first I could hardly even walk a mile. Even after doing the 6, it was like, it was difficult every day. I mean, it was really tough to get out there sometimes. I'm in the Pacific Northwest, it's raining, it's rough. It's not that great to go out there every day, especially when your body's not used to going out there and just even going for a walk. And at the time I tried to get my girlfriend to come with me, and, she did it a couple times, and then it would just like fall off. We did like a gym thing together, and it would fall off, because you want to take people with you, but it's hard, especially if they don't want to do something like that. It's really difficult. So you're kind of in on this by yourself. There's usually not a whole lot of people around you who want to help you, get to the next level with it. And eventually I did get to the level where I was walking the 6 miles, and then eventually even jogging. I was, going almost overboard. It's, the pendulum, hit the other
Yeah,
side. And I mean,
yeah.
I was going all out at a certain point. I mean, it took quite a while, but eventually I was jogging the 6 miles daily, and then even, getting injuries from doing it. But it all started from just that walking habit. And it took probably a good 2 months for it to even feel
Mhm.
good. And eventually it got kind of addicting to even just go out and do that exercise that I hadn't been used to doing. I had a smoothie every day too. So that was kind of my main thing in the morning, was like, even if I wasn't going to do that great on all the other food, I just made sure that my breakfast was always a healthy choice. And I made sure that that was the healthiest thing. And I put all my effort into that. And I tried to improve other things, but even if it was like, okay, I'm going to eat these, vegan pizza, or like, all this, there's still quite a bit of garbage and junk that I was so used to eating that stuff, it was hard to stop. It was incredibly hard to just stop doing that. But I figured if I can at least get one meal down and get this exercise in, that it should help. And that I really started losing, tremendous amounts of weight just between those two things. It was the cardio and that, and it was really giving me results. And of course, it was the same thing like we were talking about. The people around me would be like, oh, you're too skinny, or, you should, have you weighed yourself, that kind of thing. So of course that's all built into it. And I'm curious what your takes are on, what habits should be implemented at this phase. Like what is like the main things? Maybe it's like the top one thing or the top three things maybe that you need to like get down if you really want to change your health.
Uh, so I would say the habits are, it's very much dependent on everybody. For everybody, it will be something else. And often when I work with clients, I try to help them create a certain routine, put them into certain habits that once you can repeat them over a certain amount of time, you'll start getting results. And where it often starts is, what do you do after you wake up? And I usually sometimes go through like the morning routine, the afternoon routine, and starting those habits with as your day starts. So you wake up, you brush your teeth, and then like, what's next? Do you go straight away to your desk and start working, which is probably not ideal, or do you actually set time to wake up properly? Maybe do a little bit of meditation, do a bit of yoga. That could become one of the routines, the habits. Making sure you have breakfast, making sure the breakfast is not just white toast with jam and or Nutella, but actually making sure that breakfast is proper, nutritious, balanced with fruits, with nuts, and with something like oatmeal or millet or a porridge, whatever that means for. It's different for everybody, but not really just half-assing the breakfast, but really putting dedication and effort into it. So it's how you start, and it comes down to gradually adding more and more habits. So the first habit, I would say, at least that has made the most difference in my practice, is really making proper breakfast and the commitment to starting the day with a nutritious meal. The another habit would be to make commitment to exercise, to make commitment to staying active. It doesn't have to mean doing CrossFit 5 days a week. That's the way to get burned out. But it would mean going for a walk at least 3 times a week. It would mean going for a bike twice a week, or going to do some weightlifting, some calisthenics, or salsa classes, Zumba classes, yoga classes, whatever is realistic for that person. And as we speak, I actually have a challenge on Facebook going on, which is like a winter workout challenge, where we'll try to do like this community thing of people, of everybody doing whatever they want to do, but making sure we are being active, making sure everybody finds something they love and they enjoy, and do that throughout the whole month, which is because winter is often the time when we're not so active. We're just gonna huddle with our blanket, watch some Netflix, eat a lot of caloric food. So this is something we'll be doing, but I've diverted. Going back, so it's the commitment to physical activity. This is amazing habit, and whatever really that means for that person. Everybody has to identify what it means for them and do your best to stick to a certain routine. So not what happens in January, for example, a lot of gyms get suddenly filled by new people, right? You buy an annual gym ticket because they give you 20% discount. But what happens by March, the gyms are then 70% empty. So 70% have 70% less clients, because a lot of people, they just realize it's painful, it's a lot of commitment, it's expensive, and they quit because they half-assed it. They weren't really committed. They didn't go all in. It was just, I'm going to try this thing and see how it goes. And so that could be another habit, a habit commitment to being active and to have a particular routine that includes some sort of physical activity. And so I don't want to go into giving a list like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like the top habits, top activities, but rather it's encouraging the person to critically look at their current lifestyle. And maybe a lot of people can already identify what are some of the things that are out of whack. Maybe it's going to bed too late. Maybe it's skipping breakfast. Maybe it's eating huge dinners, or getting a lot of takeaways, getting a lot of deliveries. And then seeing if there is a way to remedy that, creating a certain structure that can be repeated easily. And to start with low-hanging fruit, start with something that's easy. Start with, I don't know, making 5 minutes every day for stretching. You wake up, you brush yourself, you wash yourself, and do stretching for 5 minutes, whatever, just whatever is natural, whatever feels good. And once you can find that you've actually stuck to that, it sticks for 3 weeks, you've still been stretching for 5 minutes, maybe prolong that to 10 minutes, or maybe do some, jumping jacks, do some push-ups, do some squats, and now your routine is expanding. And you feel a little bit more active in the morning, you feel your brain is working a little bit better, you feel a bit better about yourself, and maybe that morning cardio, that 10 minutes of that little exercise will actually lead to losing a little bit of hair, losing a kilo at the end of the month. And so you get a reward. It's important getting a reward for your habits. That is not just something you're doing and not seeing an outcome, but after some time you'll start seeing results. Or if you've never been eating breakfast and you've been fatigued, and suddenly you have a porridge every morning that's made of fruits and seeds and nuts and berries, after a couple of days, you already start feeling super energized. And this will be amazing reward. You'll suddenly realize, oh my God, I've never known about this. I must be doing something good. So it's encouraging you to do it even more strictly, to really stick to it, because you see it's working. And that's kind of the cause and effect of doing something, being committed and believing it will make a difference, and sticking to that. And whatever that habit will be, it will be very different for everybody. And I guess people will have to find whatever works best for them, whatever is most acceptable to them, and what is sustainable. Also, it's important, this is one of the risks of New Year resolution, not trying to do too many things at the same time. Not saying like, I'm gonna start biking, I'm gonna start going to the gym, I'm gonna start eating amazing breakfast, and I'll go vegan, and doing one thing, really sticking one New Year resolution, just one activity, one new activity that will be added to the day. Everything else remains the same, and just put that energy, put that focus into that one thing, and do it for 3 or 4 weeks. And once that sticks, once that is a part of your routine, then pick the next habit. And this is, I guess, how I would try to make it sustainable and something that sticks for long term, rather than overwhelming your system and then just, oh, I've lost it anyway, I'll just try it next year. So yeah, that would be my take on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good approach. And habits are kind of like, building blocks. And they start, once you finally have them solidified, they start synergizing together. When I was doing all the running, that was basically my habit, that I was like, if everything else just didn't work out, maybe I was like depressed, or I didn't feel good, or whatever was happening, I just made sure that I went out there and did the running, or I did the walking. That was it. Even if it was a storm, I bought storm clothes. And at first I didn't even have that. I didn't really have a whole lot of money at the time. So it was like, maybe I was getting soaked and like, just regular sweatshirt and stuff like that. And then eventually I upgraded because I was like, man, that does kind of suck, because that's a lot of miles to be out in the rain like that. So eventually I upgraded, probably was making me sick, honestly, too. But I upgraded, got the gear, and I really just kept that commitment. And nowadays it's different for me. I don't keep that commitment to the running. However, I have other exercises that I like to do, but it's more focused. I found like meditation is one that I just don't give up in the morning. I think for me, that really sets the tone for everything else. And, maybe sometimes other things that don't quite work out that well. And when you have those days where like you hit everything on the morning routine, maybe you got up on time, you did the meditation, maybe you did whatever exercise you were doing, the breakfast played out, and everything, then the day just goes excellent after that. And maybe it's a big investment. I mean, sometimes a solid morning routine, I mean, even for myself, if I'm cooking breakfast, doing the exercise, the meditation, I mean, we can be talking about, 2.5 hours sometimes. And that's a big investment for someone to make in their day. And it sounds like a lot, now that I've been doing this for so long, but someone could start with 5 minutes of building this type of thing. It's not like you just have to come in and go, okay, I've got this 2.5 hour routine that I heard on YouTube now, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to nail out this routine every day. Maybe it's just, you just make sure you meditate for 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe it'll be 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And then now you have something that you can start to work with and do other stuff based off of that.
Yeah. So baby steps, really. Start small and then build it up. Don't get overwhelmed. And just make sure you're not trying to follow somebody else's routine. Like a guy on the YouTube who's an athlete, I don't know, Usain Bolt shares his morning routine, which consists of ridiculous amount of calories and fitness and stretching and everything. But then somebody goes and tries to replicate it, and they'll be completely overwhelmed. They'll be like, I cannot do this. There's no way. So it means I failed. No, it just means the guy has been doing this routine for 20 years. He has built himself up. Where for somebody, it's like you said, the starting point will be just sitting on your couch and meditating for 5 minutes. And that's it. Really baby steps is how you make sure you don't burn out your system, and that how something can stick over long term.
Yeah, I struggled with that same kind of thing. I remember I was watching David Goggins quite a bit at the time. I read his book, and, I'd listened to him on the Joe Rogan podcast and everything. And, especially while I was running, and then it'd be like, oh yeah, man, like I can't skip today. Like, even if I'm hurt, even if something's going on, and this would lead me to getting injuries. And of course, you watch that guy, I mean, he'll actually break bones and stuff while he's out exercising. And our culture is kind of like this. It's kind of like, oh, you're giving up today, you're relaxing. It's that kind of thing. And it makes it really tough to balance that. And of course, I didn't get that. I was still a newbie with that. And of course, after I got injured quite a few times, like I remember there was this one muscle I pulled in my leg, and it was because I was jogging all the time. Like I would jog like 5-6 miles straight, and I would do it like 5 days in a row. I would go out there and I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm just every single day I'm heading out. That's what I've seen online. Everyone's doing it. All the SEALs are doing it, or whatever it was. And then of course I got this injury, and then I was like, oh, I'll just give it, a day, because I couldn't even jog because it was so bad, the muscle that was pulled. I would actually go try, and I kept trying to go back out there and do it. Like I'd be like, oh, I'll just give it this weekend. I'll just give it the weekend, and then I'm going to go back out. I'll be fine. I can start jogging again. And I'd just get injured again. And this process, it was like more than a month. And I was almost thinking, I was like, man, maybe I'm just like permanently like this. And really the problem was I didn't have an adequate balance of, I need to actually recoup and heal. And even if my workouts aren't as strenuous as that anymore, I still give myself a day to just go, okay, if I'm not feeling it today, I'm just going to relax. Like I don't need to go out there and push myself to the max. And I think that's a huge issue that most people, it's either they're not doing it or they're doing way too much of it. That's usually what I see most of the time. It's not usually like the middle ground where they're just like, oh, I'm getting my exercise in and I'm doing what actually feels good for my body. And I think that's a big part too, is a lot of people are desensitized to how their body actually feels. They're not very in tune to that, especially when they're making these changes. They've never went, oh, I'm getting injured, because they've never done those exercises. So when their leg doesn't feel good when they're running, it's kind of just like, oh, well, that'll probably just go away, or whatever. Maybe tomorrow it'll be fine. And then it's not. They still jog. And it took a lot of self-awareness and really a lot of time. I mean, I probably did that same route, I mean, nearly 1,000 times. And it was probably towards the end of that I was like, I could be in the middle of a jog, and then I could feel something in my leg and go, okay, we're cutting it right now. Like I'm not jogging anymore. I've got to be really careful and walk home. And then I'm done. Not doing anything tomorrow, not doing anything maybe the next day. And then of course I'd be back at it. Fine. Healed and recovered, because I didn't just go over the top and injure myself.
Yeah.
So
It's definitely a good topic to talk about, because we live in this hustle culture, right? Hustle, work hard, play hard, or no pain, no gain. You hear these things from all these coaches, from all these motivation speakers. You type in YouTube motivation video, and there is a guy yelling at you. He's all sweaty, he's sweating, he's yelling so much. There is an epic music playing in the background, and it gets you all fired up. And then it's easy to slip into this mindset that you need to work super hard, you need to burn yourself out and give it all you got, where this is the opposite side of the pendulum, where you actually don't allow yourself to rest and recover. And I've seen a little bit of that as well with some of the guys I work with, that they just haven't been able to allow themselves enough rest, enough recuperation, enough recovery. And from that, a lot of fatigue has come. From that, a lot of digestive symptoms have come. A lot of even depression, as the body is just trying to send you different signals, saying, "Stop, please stop. I need to take a break." And so it's that balance, having that balance in everything, having like a exhaustion-o-meter that tells you you're pushing it over the limit. You need to slow down, and whether that's a physical activity, whether that's a particular diet you're sticking to, even that can be pushed too far. And so it's always being calibrated to listening to your own body and to being attuned to how you feel. Is your body trying to tell you something? Is this activity really good for you in the long term? Can you sustain this sort of pace and speed for the next 30 years? And if the answer is no, then you need to reconsider. Especially if you're young, especially if you're putting a lot of mental resources into something, and then it can backfire, and it can lead to all sorts of health problems, health outcomes, and then the person won't even be able to sustain that energy anymore, and the thing they built up will kind of crumble on them, because it was built up on the foundation of putting huge amount of personal resources into it. And once you cannot do that anymore, the whole thing will just crumble. So we have to pace ourselves slowly and make everything we're doing sustainable. Always aim for the long-term sustainability over short-term exhaustion, over short-term burnout.
yeah, I think that's really important. I think just enjoying it. I think really that's really what a lot of it comes down to, is just making sure that you enjoy all of the stuff that you're doing. I mean, it shouldn't really be something that's so forced that it's like, oh, I've just got to, I make myself do this every day, even though I hate doing it. Like I hate running or something like that. And I'm just going to do it every day. And like, of course, there's some balance there. Like, yeah, in life, having some discipline and being able to do stuff that you don't like is good, but there's a lot of exercises, a lot of foods, a lot of things out there that are healthy that you can actually just enjoy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kind of on that same thing, what do you think are the best resources that someone could do? So in Phil's position, he's starting out and he wants to find, maybe we don't want to lead him over to the David Goggins, or we don't want to lead him into some, and some of that's probably still good, right? I mean, the guy definitely has a lot of stuff that's helpful, but maybe that's not going to be as useful for someone in his situation. We don't want someone who's not even exercising to go, yeah, now it's time for 100-mile marathon or something like that. We need practical resources that someone can go to right at the start.
Mm-hmm. So the first resource, and we've kind of touched on this already, I would say in case of Phil, would be to go speak to your doctor and see where you are at the moment. Get some testing, get some professional diagnosis if you need to, even short-term medications, if that means being just sustaining a certain status quo for a couple months and then get off that. But just really so that you know what you're at where you're starting. And then whether one of the options is to pay somebody to help you, or if you don't want to pay somebody, then you will need some resources of your own. Some of the resources, there is a lot of free stuff on YouTube. There is a lot of videos and podcasts. So finding something that resonates with you, something that when you listen to it, it seems like this is very grounded advice. This is a good, solid advice. I like this. It resonates with me. It looks like this guy has no financial bias, no personal bias. And just testing it and seeing how it works. Then you could, I don't want to give any specific resources because it will be different for everybody based on what they're doing. Then there's a lot of books. If Phil wants to, for example, educate himself on what to eat, then I tell people just grab a generic vanilla nutrition book. Don't get a book that's like how to lose weight on keto or how to lose weight on vegetarian. Get a generic, kind of like academic, dry, boring nutrition book and learn from that. Learn about the carbs, about the fats, about the proteins, about the foods. And these books are really amazing because they're looking into the research objectively most of the time. And they'll tell you, based on this research that has been going on for 30 years, this is the ideal diet you should be eating for disease prevention. And then if Phil wants to push it to one end or another, if he says, oh, I'm starting to have an ethical concern about eating animals, and he can go and look into vegan resources. If he says like, I would like to try eliminating carbs, and he could go and look into the keto resources. But always kind of start with building a basic level of understanding. And sometimes it's even, if he really wants to go and understand health, sometimes I even tell people, grab a generic book about the human body, learn a little bit how the human body works, how the digestive system works, what's the immune system, so that if you're trying to heal yourself, if you're trying to understand what's going on, it's much easier to do that when you understand what's going on in your body, how the systems operate. And it doesn't mean grabbing an anatomy textbook, but of course not. It means some simple, easy book, or like even a small catalog or online video that explains how the human body works, so that you become more resistant to all sorts of advice that may not necessarily be beneficial, or sorts of snake oil salesmen, as we call them, basically. Advice that's not helpful and that will cost you a lot of money. So having that basic understanding of how does the body work, basic of nutrition understanding, that can get you very far already. And then if you decide, I want to learn more about toxins, I want to learn more about supporting my immune system, I want to learn more about improving my athletic performance, there are books for all of that, for all those subsections. But build up a certain basic understanding a little bit about nutrition, about how to exercise, about a human body, and then see which way it leads you, which way it pulls you towards explore next. And there's always a lot of resources on the basic public health side, such as National Health Services, heart disease prevention, cancer prevention. It's like very generic services, but there is a lot of health information on those as well, that are always evidence-based, research-based. These companies are always looking into not always, but sometimes they're looking into the latest research, and they'll pull out that information and they present it to you. So a lot of can be learned on that. Go to your NHS website and see what they're talking about. See what are their basic tips on disease prevention and diet, and start there and see where it takes you.
I like that approach a lot. I think that really coming into it without trying to have a specific, set of like, okay, this is the only guide and the only route to reach this destination. I do think that it's something that's so customizable. And I think really everything in life is kind of like that. I mean, I see the same thing in business too. It's like, if you just go and try to copy some other business, like, oh, I'm just going to do just this business. Like, you could probably get some good information looking at this, but if I'm just going to copy this guy's business one to one, I'm probably not going to be that successful. It's just usually not going to happen. And health is really similar with that. And I think that probably should lead us into our next point of what are the traps to look out for in health. And I think that really ties into what we were just talking about. So what are some of the traps that you think that a newbie like Phil is going to have to be wary of when he starts getting into this information? Maybe he's just searched up on YouTube, how to be healthy, right? And our video didn't show up. He found, this whole other list of these higher ranking people, and maybe they look really credible. I mean, these people could look, maybe they got 1 million subscribers, or, some of them maybe even millions, and they're going to tell you this information. I mean, what are you going to do with all of this?
I admit it's very difficult for somebody coming with very basic understanding of health, or somebody who's never really looked into nutrition, never looked into research, to be able to dissipate among all this information. It's like, we can use a Harry Potter reference. When Harry Potter in the Goblet of Fire, he entered the huge maze and he had no idea which way to go. This is kind of how it feels. That was a nerdy analogy, but you don't know which way to go, don't know which ways to write, and you're exposed to those who are the best at marketing. You're exposed to those who score the highest on YouTube. And you'll go, how to cure diabetes, for example. You put it into YouTube, and straight away you'll get a bunch of different YouTubers, hundreds of thousands of views. And one of them will tell you, go do this diet. And other body will tell you, go do this diet. And they're completely opposite diets. And somebody with no nutrition has absolutely no idea what to do, because you're getting polarity of opinions. Both of them have a lot of likes, a lot of shares, a lot of follows. They both look credible. The quality of production is amazing. So it starts with kind of, first of all, again, if you're not sure, always start with speaking to the medical professional, because there is a consensus on many things already in the medicine, such as if you're at the risk of heart disease, the best thing is to start reducing your intake of saturated fats, of junk food, increasing the risk intake of fiber, vegetables, and fruits. Like, some of those things, a lot of scientists will already agree on. So start there. See if your doctor can provide you with something that's evidence-based, that's research-based, and they will already give you a starting point. And then based on that, you can kind of try to navigate around some of those things. You maybe have an access to that nutrition book we talked about. So that can give you some information. And in your mind, you'll already start building a certain understanding of the topic, that maybe this particular food group is not so good for you. Maybe I shouldn't be having beef every day. Maybe having French fries 5 times a week is not ideal. And then as you do that, you start being more critical and in what you listen to, in the kind of opinions you're being exposed to. And which is where another point I would say comes, not being cheap when you're doing this. So not being cheap with your health. That means as you enter supermarket, it's very tempting to go for the shelf that has all the prepackaged foods. They're huge family packs and they're cheap, and it seems like they have all the nutrients and it lasts forever in your shelves. It's gotta be good, right? It's easy to make. Where that kind of reasoning, that kind of choices could actually lead you down the spiral of really bad health, where sometimes actually investing in good quality food, investing in organic vegetables, organic fruits, in higher quality products can lead to better health outcomes and save you money down the road. Sometimes you may need to pay somebody to fix you up. If somebody, let's say if Phil has been struggling with, I don't know, let's say he's been diagnosed with osteoporosis. Your bones are actually, you're losing bone mass, and you'll need somebody to help you on that journey, because that's such a complex multifactorial condition that just doing it on your own can be difficult. So not being cheap and actually paying somebody for his health support, finding a herbalist, finding a nutritionist, finding a functional doctor, naturopath, whatever you resonate with, and then spending some money to somebody who has done that research already, who has seen other clients to help you. So that's another one, not being cheap. At the same time, not wasting money on things that may not necessarily work, such as this one supplement, this one powder is said to fix all your problems, which is usually BS. There is no one product that will fix all your health problems. And sometimes you need to go take variety of approaches. And sometimes it's actually better to invest in several different products for the same amount of money that will have more systemic effect. So it's also being wise with your investment, not being cheap, but also be wise in how you spend your money. Another one I would say is, and this is difficult for a new guy into health. This is kind of something you have to build an eye for, but a lot of people have financial incentives, and a lot of this is on YouTube, where especially if somebody is going to try to tell you something such as fruits and vegetables are bad for you and you shouldn't eat fruits, you shouldn't eat vegetables. Straight away, I'm looking, what's this guy incentive to go against an advice that it's pretty much ingrained now. It's like a testament, right? If somebody tells you you shouldn't be eating fruits and vegetables, straight away look, what's their incentive? Why would they tell it to you? And often you'll find they're either selling some sort of replacement powder, a green shake, whatever, some sort of green powder that's supposed to replace all your foods because the soil has been so depleted. And so that's another, spotting potential financial biases, just looking at what is that person doing, the person who's giving the advice. Are they selling products? Are they always recommending go visit their website and getting some discount? So spotting a financial bias that could potentially skew some of the advice you're receiving. Another one is not being too dogmatic and being able to tell when something is not working. So what this means is, if you're experiencing a health problem, it's really easy to take a man with a hammer approach, which is that to a man with a hammer, every problem is a nail. And you think you can fix all the problems with only one technique, only one particular diet, or like, this is the book I read, so it means I have to go vegetarian, and it means the vegetarian diet is the only way I can fix this. And even if it's not working, you've been vegetarian for a year and you're still not getting better, you're still stuck in this dogma and this mindset that vegetarian diet has to get me out of that. So just really being open-minded to other perspectives. Or if you tried another diet, you try the raw food diet, and they're trying to convince you have to detox yourself. Every health problem can be fixed by detoxing, but it's not working for you, right? You've been detoxing for a year and you still don't feel any better. So then acknowledge that this is not the way for me to go. Maybe for somebody else it is, but for me it doesn't work, and I cannot be dogmatic about it. It's okay, I tried, I have that personal experience, but it's not working for me, and let me test what else is out there. Let me explore other alternatives. And yeah, so not being dogmatic and not being kind of close-minded about other alternatives. Yeah, so that's another one. Then another potential issue is this thing we call green pharmacy, which is that we're trying to, because we're in natural health now, right? A lot of people get into natural health because they get kind of upset with medicine and they didn't have results with pharmaceuticals. So what they adopt is the same approach, but they change the game. Rather than applying pharmacy, you're applying green pharmacy, which means when trying to fix a problem by using a lot of supplements, you read this supplement is going to help me. So you buy 5-HTP because you've been experiencing depression, and that doesn't help because that one problem doesn't help. So you buy another supplement, another herb, and you're just throwing stuff at that without necessarily changing anything other in your lifestyle that could be driving this. And this is what we call green pharmacy, that sometimes you're not tackling the root of the problem, which could be anything really, a mental trauma. It could be a childhood trauma, something that has happened and you haven't allowed yourself to process in 10 years ago, and this is giving you depression, and you're just throwing stuff and supplements at it and it's not working. So again, being able to tell when it's not working and when the approach needs to change. And really another one of those could be just general lack of holism, which again is a bit difficult when you have a limited knowledge of health. But not thinking that all your health problems could be solved through a single thing, single strategy. And I'm seeing a lot of health professionals do this. Like, all your health problems are caused by your liver. All your health problems are caused by heavy metals. And suddenly you go down the rabbit hole of heavy metals. And you're not even willing to try some basic tests. Maybe your doctor would do some tests, and they would realize your iron is actually super low. Your vitamin D is the lowest it could be. It's 10 where it should be 90. And your health problems are stemming from this, where you go down the route of heavy metals and detoxification, or you go down the routes of taking extreme doses of supplements, where in reality, taking some iron for 3 months could have fixed your problem. So again, it comes to being open-minded to other solutions and other alternatives. And even if something sounds very, very good and very like this is the thing that will bring you results, always be a little bit skeptical, always be open to other alternatives out there. And yeah, I've rambled for what, 15 minutes now, but back to you. That's what I have to say about it.
I've basically done every single one of those traps, I think, at this point. I've fallen into a lot of that.
I think we all have in our pursuit of health.
That would have saved me quite a bit of pain, I think, to know these ahead of time. Yeah, especially like I remember just trying a bunch of nootropics at once when I first kind of started discovering those, hopping into that. I know one thing that I didn't quite hear you mention it, that I was kind of thinking of was like just looking for quick fixes. And it was, kind of playing into what you were saying, like, maybe some things are too good to be true almost in a sense. Like maybe you find this one plan or one strategy. Like I just seen this thing the other day that was like, oh, you've got to dose, 100,000 IUs of vitamin D or something like that is what I was looking at. I'd never even heard such a thing. But the guy I was hearing it from was like, cure everything. This will just do everything. And it's like, I've got book by Andy Cutler. It's his 1999 How to Diagnose Amalgam Illness, I think is what it is, right? And when you look on the cover of it, it's got about every single issue that you could think of just about on it. So of course, if someone's looking at this like, oh man, I've struggled with OCD my whole life. If I just do this heavy metal detox, it's going to be gone. It's done. That's it. This is what I've been looking for the entire time. And now I'm going to go and do all this stuff without, maybe going and just trying a few basic things. I mean, that metal detox, I mean, from what I've researched, I mean, this is something that could take years. And if it really isn't the problem, you're wasting, thousands of dollars. And even that's probably not as much of a quick solution, but it almost, in a sense, it's easy. It's easy for the mind because you don't have to think anymore. Once you've found a protocol or something, there's no more thought that needs to go into that. Mm-hmm. And another big one that I didn't hear you mention was food labels. Food labels are the absolute worst. Those are probably some of the most deceptive, at least here in the US. I don't know how it is over there in the UK. However, I literally, I'll find stuff that was like, I had this jar of, it was like organic mangoes that were suspended in a liquid or whatever, right? And I looked up, because I was oh man, I'll get these because I hate peeling mangoes. Like no one wants to do that. So I figured, just get this jar of them. And it had like this one thing in it. It was like the mangoes and this one other thing. I looked it up, and they used it to de-ice the roads. This thing, and I didn't fully, dive in and do every little bit of research, but this was like certified organic, and it had this chemical in it that was used to de-ice roads. And now I don't know what the effects on humans are or whatever, but that was literally the first thing that came up was this is used as a road de-icer. And this stuff is tricky. It's the same thing when you see like the natural flavors and you look at your label on a product and it's like, oh yeah, it just has natural flavors in it. And that word natural, it sounds like, oh yeah, that must be natural. And then the actuality of it is it's made up of chemicals. That literally natural flavors is made up of chemicals, and they're incredibly deceptive. And,
Yeah.
it could even be things that are, especially when you get into more of the junk food type items, there's a lot of deception that's on the front. Maybe it's like lower fat, or they've done, maybe there's no sugar in it, but yet we've put, this other artificial toxic thing in there in place of sugar. So you're not actually getting something that really is that much better for you. It's just, some other garbage that tricked you into buying this and made it look healthier or look more appealing. And I think that just learning how to read a food label, it literally takes years of
Yeah.
practice. It's something that someone who, if you actually want to eat healthy, it's a skill that you have to be able to develop, is to be able to look at these products and understand what something actually means and what is actually going to be in the product. I know
Yeah.
with like eggs is a really good example. There'll be things like cage free is like a really good example here in the US. It means like almost nothing. You can watch, there's some pretty good documentaries on that. I can't think of the name now, but it's like this guy, he started up his own fast food franchise, and it was basically to expose the food industry. It was the same guy, he did like the 30 days of eating fast food, or what, super
Super
size me
size
guy.
me.
Maybe
Yeah.
you'll find it off. It's the same guy. He hosted this thing and he ran this chicken farm, and he showed that all these practices of like how you could name the chickens and all this stuff of like, oh, it's cage free and all this is just totally bogus. And then, maybe to give you an answer here, which probably should still be verified, you have to look for pasture raised eggs if you actually want to get the highest quality ones. And then you would want organic if you're going to get even higher quality from that. Because I'd seen something I was reading was like even little bits of like, I think they feed a meat or something in the other one. They could actually feed the lower level chickens here. And I don't even think they're supposed to eat meat. I'm not sure how that works with the chicken. I don't believe I believe they're like vegetarian naturally. I don't think that they would be
Yeah,
eating some sort
naturally
of meat.
chickens won't. I've kind of when I was a kid, my grandparents, they had a farm. They were keeping chickens, and yeah, they would usually be vegetarians. They're like picking, well, vegetarians, they're picking bugs, which doesn't really make them vegetarian, but they wouldn't eat meat. They wouldn't, like, if you put a bunch of well, chicken meat or pork, they wouldn't really necessarily go for it. So yeah, it's deceptive. And all these labels, the problem is a lot of them aren't really being regulated on a wider scale. We can take a case of, for example, how supplements are being regulated by FDA. It's an interesting thing, I actually read about it today. So for example, you want to come up with a new product and like a new probiotic, and you can even name your own strain. Like you can name your own probiotic because it already has something that's been verified, like it has some lactobacillus, it has some bifidobacterium. You put a strain together and then you send it to FDA for approval. And after that, even if you don't receive a response, after 3 months, you can start selling that product. So it's enough if you send it to FDA, even if they don't respond, even if there is no approval, nothing, you send it to them, you can now start selling that product. And so there is nothing to really regulate what's going to happen next. Are you really putting that stuff, what you're claiming? Is the bacteria surviving the process? What if your capsule is just full of that bacteria? What if it won't survive the transition from the stomach to the duodenum to the intestine? So, and then if you're just using the basic strains, even if they're not helping people, there's no way to know. So it's very tricky, and because this is why the shelves are so full of supplements and products, because the regulation, despite there is a regulation going on making sure people don't die from this stuff, right? You cannot have an ingredient that is known to harm people, which is kind of a gray area with all these chemicals, like you said, the road defreezer. Maybe because we just don't have any research, nobody has really looked into it properly and shown like if people eat this stuff, they get sick from it. But designing such a study would be incredibly difficult because you cannot just feed humans. Let's say you want to test a study whether aluminum in deodorants gives a breast cancer. You cannot design a study where you'll have 50 women and you divide them, and one of them will be using the deodorant with aluminum, and you'll be watching how many of them develop breast cancer. So the best we can do is either animal studies or just observation, and we're looking at people who use this sort of stuff, do they develop a disease? And it's incredibly difficult to make correlations to be able to see, does A cause B, which is why this is such a muddled water. This is a huge gray area, and it's incredibly difficult to navigate around. And I know we've kind of diverged from the original topic where you're talking about labeling and that. But what I wanted to say is this: it's really now it's most difficult than ever for consumers to really identify, is this good food good for me? Is it not good for me? Where it always comes down to going back to what's natural for us, going back to the natural foods, the one that don't need any label. A bag of apples doesn't need any label besides the plastic packaging, right? You don't need how many calories does an apple have. You don't need a trademark. It's an apple, or it's a mango, it's a sweet potato, and those sorts of foods. Getting back to the basics. And if a food has so many ingredients that it takes you 5 minutes to read them, and half of them you cannot even pronounce in 5 seconds, then it's probably not a good food for you. But then getting into the nitty-gritty of, is that chemical good? Is this chemical good? Is this good for me? For most of it, we have no answers, and it's a minefield, really. We may need another 50 years till we'll know whether that or that has a negative health outcome. For example, such as we know about parabens in shampoos. Now we know they are potentially harmful to human health, or we know about some other components, but majority of the stuff we have no idea. And what happens if you mix it up? If you mix up this food ingredient and this food and with this drink, and suddenly have a combination when it combines with your enzymes and with the pH in your stomach, what is that going to do to that? We have no idea.
Yeah.
Right, so.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to navigate that. And especially like if you have studies that are just going to be backed by the people who make the product, or like the money is funneling from the people who make the product to the study, I mean, it's really going to make it incredibly difficult to know what is actually the truth. And I think, it really, just as a consumer, I mean, sometimes you're just gambling. I mean, a lot of the time you're making an assumption that something is, and to a degree you have to, because you've got to eat tomorrow. You've still got to do all these things. You need these products, and you rely on these people to be honest. And it's incredibly, deceitful when you find out that, oh, wow, that company I really believed in has really just been selling me a bunch of crap. I mean, that's what I've experienced a lot, even just buying, certain grocery products. And then I learned something about it, and it's like, wow, I really trusted that brand, and I've been buying it for a long time. And then I found out that they were doing something cheap that was, taking advantage of me. They were cutting a corner here, and I was paying up for this product.
Yeah. It's a slippery slope. And like you're saying, sometimes these studies are paid for. For example, a lot of studies on probiotics are paid for by the probiotic companies, because you would need to invest a lot of resources, a huge amount of resources to get the participants and then control these studies, double blind them and randomize them. And so academia is not going to do that, because there isn't a lot of potential incentive for them. So a lot of times it's the company develops a product and then pays for a study. And it doesn't mean all studies that have a financial bias are bad studies. That it doesn't mean it's bad science. And this is a lot of people are saying all these studies funded by, I don't know, by a pharmaceutical business, or all these studies funded by big dairy. It doesn't always mean it's a bad study, but it's something for us to be aware of. There is a potential incentive. But for some particular studies, such as probiotics, most of the research we have is by companies selling probiotics. And so there's always an incentive wanting my product to look good. And if it turns out your product, let's say you've advertised your product is good for IBS, and then it turns out your product does absolutely nothing for IBS, you're not going to put it on your website. I'm selling products that's helping with IBS. By the way, the study says it's not helping. So yeah, it's tricky. It gets tricky once you start going down all these rabbit holes and exploring, and everybody has their opinions, everybody has their studies, and yeah, it's difficult.
Well, and speaking of rabbit holes, I think we should kind of go into toxins here a bit. And I think that this is something that, especially as a newbie, for someone like Phil that we're talking about, is literally not even going to have any idea of really what even is a toxic, or what is toxic. Like what is a toxin? How does it even affect you? And what even should you look out for? And I remember when I was growing up, I mean, there could be stuff like mold in our room, and that would just be like, oh, there's just some mold in the room. The house is old, and that kind of thing. Like, yeah, maybe my mom would be like, yeah, you should be cleaning that mold or something like that. But even then, there's not like, oh, you have to properly clean the mold because you're going to spread the particles or anything. There's no knowledge about anything like that. And that's just one little thing. And then how maybe that mold affects your health every night, how even just something as small as just having some mold in your room, of how that's really affecting your health. So I'm curious, where would you start someone like Phil, of maybe just like maybe some ideas of where he could start to get an idea of some things that might be really affecting him that would probably give him the most results. So we're not going to maybe dive too much in the nitty gritty of all the toxins, but maybe just a few things that are going to give him like, wow, this actually could maybe cure some health problem he has or something, if he finds and eliminates this source of toxins in his life.
So with toxins, it's a difficult debate. It's a very difficult topic to get into. It's one of those niche topics that maybe somebody like Phil wouldn't necessarily go for straight away. If in Phil's position, we said like always start with getting some tests and playing around with your diet, become a little bit more active, regulating your stress. And once you once you dig into all of that, once you feel like you've exhausted all of that and you're still not making progress, maybe that's when it would be interesting to explore some of these topics as well, such as toxins and pollutants. One of the problems in this area is we often don't know how much effect do these things have. How deep is that of a problem? How much you absorb? For example, we know that certain fish contain mercury. Whether that mercury gets there from a human activity, or whether it gets there from volcanic activity, or from other natural activities, which we have no way to prevent. But we also don't know how much we absorb. You don't know if you eat a tin of salmon, how much of that are you really absorbing? How much of that gets tied back to the fiber in the meal and removed from your colon? How much is reabsorbed? How much is getting so we don't know how to track these things. We don't know how to measure them most of the time. And so there isn't a lot of scientific consensus on many of these things, which doesn't mean these things are not harmful. We know, for example, lead is harmful. Which is why in 1970s or a little bit later, all the fuel and petrol has become unleaded, because we've seen significant negative consequences on people's health, like significant lead toxicity that lead to things like childhood anemia is one of the things, or it could lead to things like developing of Parkinson's in older women. The women who have actually grown up around the time where fuel was leaded, they now have lead in their bones, because the lead can kind of resemble the molecules of calcium, I think, and so they can get stored in the bones. And as they enter the menopause, all this lead is suddenly being released in their blood, and the body, a lot of that is being stored in the brain, and they can end up with Parkinson's or with Alzheimer's disease. And these are things that really not widely known or talked about. But these are some of the more obvious ones, I would say. Some you can test for, but then if we look at the tests for these things, tests for heavy metals, we don't know what works. We don't have a reliable testing method to test. We have hair samples, nail samples, but these methods have never been proven to be really effective. They are not a reliable representation of what's happening in your body, if you look at the research, at least, if we were to believe in what we see in studies. And so let's say you do a test for heavy metals. Let's say Phil goes a little bit deeper and does tests for heavy metals, and he sees my arsenic is high, my mercury is high, my nickel is high, and suddenly he gets a panic about all of this, like, oh my God, what does this mean? Where it could mean a sample of it got into his hair for somewhere else, and it was never in his body, or like the sample he's receiving, the testing company is not regulated by a bigger governing body. Like in UK, there are companies that are regulating testing companies. UK Equals is one of them. I don't remember what it stands for, but if a company is not regulated by UK Equals, ideally you wouldn't be getting tests from them because they're not regulated and they're not their standards are not overseen by a bigger governing body, so they can choose whatever. They can choose whatever ranges are healthy ranges and unhealthy ranges. And so what Phil would find on his test, maybe those would still be the safe doses or something that's never been proven to be unhealthy. It's something that most of us would have if we tested ourselves, because we live in industrialized nations. But now he goes into this rabbit hole of detoxification and then all sorts of dangerous protocols that are aimed to take these metals and move them around your body, and you have no idea what's going to happen. So it's I guess I'm kind of going in circles now. What I'm trying to say, it's a really difficult topic to go into without really knowing what the person is doing, without really having the awareness of toxin. And it starts with getting a lot of education on this before even going into some sort of detoxification protocol. Read a bunch of books, speak to experts, speak to somebody who has done that research, who has gone into that, who has guided other people through it. So don't do heavy metal chelation on your own. Get a guided professional, get somebody who is certified in heavy metal chelating and let them help you. And then what Phil can also do are the more obvious things, such as one of them would be plastics. I think plastics is an interesting one to talk about. Not using a lot of plastic bottles, not putting boiling water in plastics. When you buy these foods in plastic containers, don't heat them in a microwave. Now change your plastic containers to the glass containers. And be careful with how much food is wrapped in plastic. Like, don't heat food in the plastic packaging. Just not using plastic bottles and not heating food in plastic packaging will probably remove 90% of your plastic exposure. And some of that you'll get in water, some of that you'll get in through other means, through I don't know what else is there, different products, but majority would come from food or like cans with beans and lentils. Another one are common hygienic products we use, such as we already talked about aluminium in deodorants. We're still not exactly sure if there is a direct correlation between aluminium in the products and breast cancer. We suspect there is, the science suspects there is a connection, but it's very difficult to make that connection because of what we talked about earlier. Still, that being said, it makes sense to find a deodorant that's natural, that's aluminium free, that's paraben free, and really something with essential oils, and that goes with the rest of your cosmetics. So for guys, for example, for me, I have shorter hair. I'm only using a single soap. I'm using it for my face, I'm using it for my hair, for the excuse me, for the rest of my body. And I found it works exactly well. I don't have any weird body smell. My skin is not dry. So it works perfectly. And the soap is based on essential oils, just some basic natural ingredients. We buy from a company called Beauty Kitchen, and I have no incentive from them. But it's a company I would encourage people in UK to look into. Anybody in UK looking at this. This is a brilliant company selling very, very green, very sustainable products. There are companies like this popping everywhere now. So look at all the cosmetics you're using. Look at all the shampoos and the face creams and all the ointments, and just put it all on the table and realize how much of that you're using, and do you really need all of that? Do you need to use the shaving foam, the aftershave, and the pre-shave? And where in reality you could buy an electric razor, or maybe you could just use a soap and you would have exactly the same effect. And then just some jojoba oil or coconut oil and put it on your face after you shave. You don't need to put chemicals on your face all the time. And so that's another thing, the cosmetics of everyday use. It doesn't mean what I'm trying to say is not all cosmetics are bad. It's just looking at it critically. If we were to go down this rabbit hole, like we said, Phil should always start with his diet and his exercise and so on. But if he wants to go down this rabbit hole, then personal products are a good area to look into. Another thing is, you touched on this earlier, water. It's a good idea to filter your water if you live in big cities. If in Europe, it's a little bit more difficult to get data on this than in US. In US, I think there's a bigger regulation into this and you have more data. But it's probably a good practice to filter your water. If you live in a huge city, man, I'm not used to talking so much. If you live in a bigger cities where water is just being recycled constantly, just getting a filtration jug, or if you want to go further, a reverse osmosis system, it's a brilliant guarantee to make sure your water is clean if you want to take that extra step. And it can be worth the investment, because what if that water is being contaminated with copper, or with you have a copper pipes and that copper is going into your water, or like what if there is something else potentially that's being in that water? I think it's worth making that investment and at least buying that filtration jug or the reverse osmosis filter. And you can now buy portable reverse osmosis filters. You can take it with you if that's a concern. If a person wants to go into that depth and explore this area, then there are ways to clean that water. Then we could talk about air pollution. If Phil lives in a huge busy city such as New York City, you know, you lived on Fifth Avenue, you have a window on the first floor, it's always open, and you have taxis, you have 10,000 taxis running every 10 minutes. So that's going to contribute to your health negatively. All those fumes, all those, we call them VOC, volatile organic compounds, which are basically all these gas, diesel, and petrol emissions. And when they are on the direct sunlight, when all these chemicals are on the main street, and when you have a direct sunlight shining on them, then you have ozone forming, and it's like a chemical reaction. And then when humans breathe ozone in those concentrations, you can have respiratory issues. And there is some research to suggest that exposure to these chemicals can lead to respiratory issues, can lead to cardiovascular issues, can lead to development of asthma and allergies. So it's another thing to look at. Do you live at the roadside of a super busy street? Is your windows always open? Are you breathing all that stuff? Is your air polluted? You know, just go to the websites. They're showing you the statistics about where's the biggest pollution. And if possible, consider, and this is not always possible, but if possible, Phil could move to a location with lesser pollution. Like maybe don't live on the main street, but move a few blocks back where there is not a main street, or move to countryside, or go on hikes at least a couple times a week. Go in nature. Nature is really cleansing and purifying. Nature helps you get some of the stuff out of your system. Or if this is not an option, buy a HEPA filter, buy a filtration system that will be in your home and filtering all this air all the time. So this is another one interesting. If you bought a house and you cannot move from there, then maybe don't keep your windows open during the rush hour. Though if you have to spend some time in the traffic, consider wearing a respirator, and then buy a home filter, have it turned on, even if it costs you $100 every quarter in filters. It's still worth that the stuff will filter all this garbage from the air. Then another thing that we can look into is food contamination. So pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, termicides, all those acids that are being put in our food, and then a lot of them have been put there since 1950s or so. And these things we need them. This is how the offer meets the demand, right? We're so many people on the planet now that if we were not using pesticides, we would lose half of the crops. If you ever tried having your having your own garden, then you'll see that very often you have snails and slugs and centipedes eating on your kale, eating on your cabbage, and some of that you lose to dryness, some of them you lose to other insects. And so these things, the chemicals, they're protecting our food, they're ensuring the price of those crops can be kept at the level that's affordable to the general public, but also that we have enough for everybody. We have enough vegetables and fruits for everybody. So but then there is the downside that sometimes using too many of these chemicals, and then when children are being exposed to that, or when mother is overly exposed to that stuff and gives a birth to a child, that child who hasn't developed his or her immune system yet properly is born with a cocktail of chemicals and heavy metals, and that can become a huge issue, potentially then leading to a I'm sorry, leading to something like a childhood leukemia or childhood cancer. And this is another huge gray area, because we have no way telling what's causing these things, but potentially these could be things that are driving some of those dangerous conditions. And so but then looking at the food contamination, looking at the pesticides and herbicides, we could still say that the benefits of consuming those foods still outweigh the potential costs of using pesticides. So such as benefits of eating berries or carrots or broccoli and all sorts of lovely vegetables, it still outweighs the potential damage of any pesticides or herbicides being used in that. Because when we look at the wider research, we can clearly see that the people who eat more of this stuff live longer, live better, they have less disease, they have less heart attack, they have less immune system problems. And so we also have a powerful detoxification. We have liver, we have gut, and we have kidneys who are always cleansing. I mean, liver is our main detoxification system, liver and kidneys. And we've adapted to being able to deal with incredible amount of toxin we are exposed to these days. So our detoxification organs are also adapting. Our liver is pretty much working 24/7, eliminating this stuff, getting it packaged and sending it through the gut. So we can do a lot to also support our detoxification system. This is what Phil can do. On one hand, educate yourself where these things are, the main ones, like we talked about, the cosmetics, the plastics, the food, with the most contaminated foods, the heavy metals in things like fish. So educate yourself about that, but then support your health so that your elimination is better, so that you're not necessarily drinking alcohol every night. That's a huge burden on your liver. Don't smoke a lot of cigarettes. If you live in super polluted area, consider taking some measures to either mitigate that or move out. And you're already unburdening your liver by maybe 30%, 40% just by not living on a main street. And so that any pesticides and herbicides you eat will be detoxified, because your liver now has free space to deal with this stuff. Eating a lot of fiber in the diet is huge help to detoxification, because it binds some of that stuff and it helps you to remove it. So for example, when you have a fish with a huge portion of vegetables, it's much better than when you have a fish just eating from a can, right? Because that fiber is tying. There are also polyphenols that are helping you detoxify, different vitamins and antioxidants are helping you trap some of those particles. And I know we're kind of heading down a rabbit hole here, but it's again not being the man with the hammer who says, I'm going to tackle this problem head on, I'm going to go straight away for some aggressive detoxification, where there is a lot you can do just by living a healthier lifestyle, exercising, going to sauna, for example, red sauna or infrared sauna, I mean, or the Finnish sauna, just sweating out, you're already losing some of that stuff. And it's been shown in research that when people put people in sauna, they tested this, swapped some of that sweat, they saw toxins and heavy metals in that. So you can already do a lot by going for a bike ride, right? For half an hour, for an hour, really getting some sweat pumping, going to a sauna, going to a swimming pool, and just stimulating the move of the muscle and of the lymph, and getting the blood circulating, eating that high fiber diet, the natural diet. When you can buy organic foods, it's again comes down to when we said not being cheap. If you have the money, if the food is available, then buy it. Invest in that organic food, in those fresh fruits and vegetables. And yeah, but don't at the same time don't become overly dogmatic about this, like starting to see toxins everywhere. Everything is toxic now. I don't know. I could not even drink unfiltered water because it's going to kill me, or I cannot eat non-organic carrot because it certainly has to have insecticides in it. And trying to see it more systemically and seeing where are the biggest hits, what's the most lowest hanging fruit, right? when you're going and I'm going, I want to be healthy, I want to get rid of disease. What's the lowest hanging fruit? And it's usually not the toxins. It's the, what am I putting in my mouth? Am I exercising? Am I sleeping 6 hours a day? Or maybe I'm sleeping way too much. Maybe I should be sitting less and actually go around and move a little bit. And once you have all of that done, all of those you got covered, and you want to go deeper, then you go into toxins. Then you can go into all this other stuff, but always start with the basics. So that's kind of my take on that.
Yeah, that was great. That was really a lot to unpack there, especially for someone who's maybe not even heard about toxins or really experienced any of that stuff, at least, information wise, they're experiencing it, in their environment all the time. I kind of wanted to follow up on a couple points that you were talking about. So with the plastic thing, and you mentioned that first, I had done some research on that before where they were doing autopsies and they could actually find plastic in all of the organs in these US citizen autopsies. So, I mean, these are getting into, all over in the body. There's lots of these microplastics that are, entering into our bodies. And it was about 6 grams of plastic a week is getting into the average person in the US. And that's like, it's about a credit card. So you got to think about a credit card is getting into your body, and all of these effects of this plastic, we really don't know the full extent of that. I mean, we have some, some research going on that we're kind of going like, okay, this is an endocrine disruptor, this could be causing, hormone imbalances and things like that. However, we still don't really know everything that's going on. And if we're not cutting out intake of this stuff, I mean, it doesn't really take a lot of science to go, okay, maybe I shouldn't need a credit card. I think that that's a pretty, everyone could kind of come to a common agreement that that's probably not something you should do. So, yeah, and I'd seen it was like the water was the main source is kind of what you were getting into. So maybe someone like this Phil character, he might be living in an apartment and it may be hard for him to maybe install a reverse osmosis water system. So I've actually personally, I do have one that's in the sink. I have one that's like under sink. It's like I think it's like 5 stages. And then I have, it's called an AquaTrue, and it's on the counter one. And of course I don't have any affiliation with these, but that I've been pretty pleased with that. And I took it on vacationing and everything. And yeah, I didn't send in the water for lab testing and some stuff like that. So there's obviously more levels that you can go in on this. And of course you could even buy faulty products. I think it's important to make sure you're buying, genuine filters and things like that. I notice even with my under the sink one, it's like, oh yeah, you could just spend $40 and replace all the filters, and the real manufacturer sells them for $200. And it was like that trap we're talking about of being cheap. It's like, if this is one of the biggest source of plastics and other metals and toxins maybe that's getting in my body, an extra $150 is really not going to be that big of a deal if I really want to improve my health.
Yeah.
And even like you were talking about with like the beauty products, a lot of that is, really tricky. And our culture encourages these products. It's like I see my little sister, she's, putting all this tan stuff on her. It's like, makes her turn tan. And I mean, you look at the back of the bottle and I'm like, I don't even know what this is. I mean, this is like it's completely some chemical concoction. And now she looks like she lives, in Miami. And she's, tans 5 hours a day, basically, because she put all these
another thing,
chemicals.
you're having sun shining on the top of it. Like you have the UV radiation now mixed with all those chemicals. And what is that doing? We have no idea. Nobody knows.
Yeah, I mean, this is just totally just, oh, and then, but it's normal. Everyone, especially for females, they're highly pressured to do a lot of these chemicals. Like I had seen, it was like, I think even still today, some lipsticks even contain lead. And it's very tricky to navigate this. I know there's these apps on your phone. There's one that I've used. It's called Think Dirty. And you can actually scan the barcodes of products and it'll give you a breakdown of the chemicals in them. And it'll give you like, okay, maybe this chemical is better. Of course, maybe you shouldn't just take everything on face value. But if you were someone who was like kind of just hopping into this toxin thing and you're kind of like, being kind of lazy here, I don't really want to do a whole lot of research, I would download something like the Think Dirty app and just scan those barcodes, like, maybe your dish soap, and you'll find fragrances that, maybe are linked to cancer. And I'd scanned some of my sister's like lotions, and there was one in there that was linked to like breast cancer. There was a chemical in there. And these products, I mean, they're marketed towards women. And you can't tell me that these companies aren't aware of these chemicals in there. I'm sure there's some financial gain, or it gives that certain effect that's desirable by having that chemical in that thing. So that's, of course, it's hard for them to not make money off this stuff.
Yeah, it's another one of those rabbit holes, and once you go down and you try to identify all those chemicals, for example, some of those, they are the trade secret. So I think this is still the case, that at least in US, that the manufacturers, like you have a Nivea cream or you have a Garnier cream, the manufacturer isn't obligated to disclose the trade secret, the secret mix of ingredient that makes the product special, that makes it what it is, that makes X product what it really is and what it does. And so this makes it really difficult for research, because researchers don't gain an access to this cocktail of chemicals, and then they have no idea. There is no way to test, like, what are these things. We cannot isolate them, we cannot test them. And so it's a huge problem. And this is also with food, this is with drinks. So getting that, what's that secret core of that thing that is making it special? What are the chemical cocktails, and what if those chemicals are mixed with other chemicals I'm also putting on myself? So you use a face cream, then you put a makeup, then you put something else on the top of that, and then you put some sort of spray on the top of that. How are all those chemicals interacting with it? Nobody has ever looked into that, and it's scary. Really, it starts with educating yourself about at least the ones we know are harmful, and then seeing how much you can reduce that exposure, right? Do you really need to use 3-4 face creams? Do you maybe consider not wearing makeup when you're at home, or and I know these are personal things and I don't want to go into that, but sometimes we use particular products because it has become a habit. It has become a habit that for shaving, you need to have pre-shave, aftershave, shaving foam, and another product, where in reality, you can do it easily with a soap, like with that. So seeing how many of those products are simply coming down to habit. And if you replace it for something more natural, you could still get the same results with shampoos as well. I haven't seen any difference between using commercial shampoo from, I don't want to name any brands, to a soap from a bunch of essential oils and some glycerol. I've literally seen no difference in the quality of the outcome. So it's being open to experimentation.
Yeah, I think we've really got a good comprehensive overview on, how to get healthy here. I mean, we covered, what does it mean and where to start. We covered, how long will it take to get results here. We've covered the habits, best resources, traps, and now even toxins. And I feel like this really is just like the comprehensive overview that really someone is going to need. And I was curious, did you have any like last things you wanted to maybe mention about, what Phil could do, or anything like that maybe you felt like you missed out on during, the rest of this podcast we've had here?
Yeah, so if Phil, or really anybody interested, if this person is still watching or still listening after all this information, we've shared a lot of stuff here. We've talked about we've covered a lot of ground, a lot of factors. So it's important to start slow, start small. Like we talked about those habits. Don't, just because you've heard a bunch of stuff that like you think, oh my God, I need to start doing all this stuff. Make it sustainable, make it slow. So pick one thing and start with that, such as look at your breakfast. And this is one of my favorites. I know I just keep talking about breakfast, but look at what you're eating. Look at what you're putting on that plate. And if you're getting toast with the Nutella, then start there. And polish it, look into, make it into something nice, make it into something complex that has a lot of fiber, a lot of fruits. And that will be the first thing. Or fix your sleep. Just focus on your sleep. If you know you're not sleeping enough, then fix that. Make sure you're getting those 8.5 hours. If you struggle to exercise, then look into some techniques how you could become more active. If you're somebody who hates exercise, or if you're somebody who just doesn't know what to do, go in a gym and hire a coach for a couple of sessions, or like just start walking 10,000 steps a day or 8,000 steps a day. Get one of the sports watches, and set it like every day I want to have at least 6,000 steps. I still don't even have 7,000 today. But like do 8,000 steps every day, and that will be your thing. That will be the new thing you will try. So start slow, take one thing and slowly build it up. Once that thing becomes sustainable, once it becomes a habit, take it to the next level. Try something else. Don't try everything at the same time, or don't get exposed to so many resources that you just completely get overwhelmed and not end up not doing anything, and I'm getting depressed, anxious, and stressed because there's so much resources. Yeah, and then if you feel like you're overwhelmed, then start by talking to your doctor and get some basic evidence-based information from your doctor. Like there's just some basic information. They can usually give you a document about like what to do if you suffer from really bad allergies, what to do if you have high cholesterol. Don't get overexposed to all these resources. Go to your doctor, ask for some basic information, and then take it from there. Yeah.
Thanks so much for doing this with me today. This has really been a really insightful talk. I feel like we've got really all the bases covered. I think like really this is what I would have imagined for myself if I could have listened to something for a couple of hours that would have dramatically changed my health. It definitely would have been this. So I really appreciate you making this with me today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to talk about this, refresh some of those things, and hopefully we can do another one of these sometime in the future.
Yeah, I look forward to it. And for anyone watching, again, I'll have links to Michael's website, Andro Health, and his Facebook page in the description of this video. So make sure you go check him out. He's got a lot of free material on his website. He's got guides. He offers naturopathic support, and really just a lot of from challenges to all sorts of stuff. It's well worth checking it out. His blog has a lot of good information. So make sure you guys check that out below, and have a great day.
Thanks. Have a great day. Bye.